Alright kid, get in here, have a seat. You know the drill by now. We got a lot to go over, so let's get started. First, let's get the preliminaries out the way. You doing okay? Of course you are. You're above ground, you're still breathing, and best of all, you're getting ready to watch another long-form video from me, Screwface Capone, the gaming mobster. How awesome is that? So a few years ago, I did a video about where in the world is Carmen Sandiego. Looking back, it didn't quite turn out the way that I wanted it to. There was some stuff in there that I probably should have left out. The audio wasn't what I wanted it to be. And I tacked on an unboxing video of a device, and it kind of went a little bit longer than I wanted it to. So these past few years, I've been doing remakes of some of my older videos. So one of the videos I wanted to do was touch upon that Carmen Sandiego video and really give it the respect that it deserves. So you can consider this the HD, remaster, remake, reimagining, whatever you want to call it. I'm giving it another do-over. And hopefully the second time around, it hits a little bit better. Before we hop in, I want to welcome any newcomers to the family. Here on this channel, the Don covers everything from indie games to retro games to hardware. I'm doing everything from live streams to unboxings to reactions, countdowns, and documentaries, kind of like the one we're about to hop into. So if it's got something interesting to say about video games, chances are it's fair game around here. Now if you're enjoying what you want to see and you want to join the mafia, hit that subscribe button and the Don will make you a made man. If you want to do me one extra, hit that bell icon, that way you'll be the first to know whenever I drop new material. I drop new stuff on a semi-regular basis, so you're not going to want to miss any of it. Now, let's hop in. Video games are educational. Yes, I know that's a wild statement to make these days, considering what's popular. But you can actually learn a lot from video games. And no, I'm not talking about the usual, quote, video games improve hand-eye coordination argument, even though that's true and been backed up by research. I'm talking about video games that can actually teach you something. Take Kerbal Space Program for example. The game and its sequel teach players the basics of physics, engineering, and space flight by having them design rockets and launching them into orbit. Historical franchises like Total War, Kingdom Come Deliverance, and Assassin's Creed immerse players in different time periods, often drawing from real-world history and research to bring these settings to life. And then you got Koei Tecmo's catalog of historical strategy and action games, whether it's the deep political maneuvering of Nobunaga's ambition, or the over-the-top battlefield chaos of Dynasty Warriors. Just don't use Dynasty Warriors by itself to write your book report about Asian history. Even games that aren't traditionally educational can teach valuable skills. Minecraft and Roblox have introduced countless players to coding, game design, and digital creativity. Even Grand Theft Auto San Andreas was teaching players about the importance of proper dieting and exercise. And if you're old enough, you probably remember that entire wave of brain training games that took over the Nintendo DS. Of course, games built specifically for educational purposes, what we like to call edutainment, are often dismissed as kid stuff. But for those of us who grew up during the 80s and 90s, there's a certain nostalgia attached to them. Some of you cats are like me will probably remember sitting in the school computer lab playing number munchers on those old Macintosh computers. Or you might have spent hours trying to survive the Oregon Trail, rationing supplies while hoping nobody dies with dysentery. Then there are humongous entertainment's beloved adventure games like Putt Putt and Pajama Sam. And there's also Raya System's strange little experiment with health education games on the SNES. Anyone remember Captain Novolin and Rex Ronan Experimental Surgeon? But the less said about those, the better. Still, among all the educational games released over the years, one franchise managed to strike a balance between learning and entertainment that few others could match. It was simple enough for kids to enjoy, yet engaging enough to keep adults interested. It would grow into a multimedia phenomenon with a fan base spanning generations. That franchise, of course, is Carmen Sandiego. In the first game, where in the world is Carmen Sandiego? Created by Broderbund Software in 1985, Where in the World is Carmen Sandiego will launch a franchise that will eventually span dozens of games, books, and multiple television series. Along the way, Carmen herself became one of gaming's most recognizable icons. In many ways, she stands alongside characters such as Mario, Sonic, and Master Chief as one of the medium's most enduring figures. She's also one of gaming's most prominent female characters and one of its most recognizable Latina protagonists. What makes it even more impressive is that Carmen's identity was never defined by stereotypes. Despite being a criminal mastermind, her role as a thief was never tied to her ethnicity or reduced to a caricature. Matter of fact, in some iterations of the franchise, she's even a hero. The Netflix adaptation in particular reimagined her as a globe-trotting vigilante who uses her talents to take down even bigger criminals. Enduring for more than 4 decades, Carmen's not just the face of an educational game. She's the face of one of the most successful edutainment franchises that's ever been created. Where in the World is Carmen Sandiego was the brainchild of Broderbund Software programmer Dane Bigham. He took inspiration from early text adventure games such as Colossal Cave Adventure and Zork. Adventure games at the time often relied upon command text input. Players would tend to have difficulty coming up with the correct phrase for what was needed to proceed. Bigham's idea was to write a similarly styled adventure game. This new one, however, would be aimed at children. Rather than a strictly text interface, Bigham decided to use a menu-driven interface, both to make it simple and to utilize the power of the Apple II computer, which he was developing the game for. Bigham's game wasn't intended to be educational at first, just a simple game of cops and robbers. Again, the idea was to keep things simple, and a system that was similar to the exploration-heavy text games of old would have been too complex for what Bigham was trying to accomplish. No big text commands, just discover the clues to find the thief. However, Broderbund co-founder Gary Carlston suggested that maybe the game should focus more on geography, even suggesting that Bigham make use of an almanac. Ideally, this almanac would be included with the game itself. Though he wasn't too loud about the idea at first, Bigham would eventually go along with it, working with artists Gene Portwood and Lauren Elliott to come up with a basic storyline and art style. The team would later bring in David Sefkin to write the script. Sefkin would eventually come up with the villain named Carmen Sandiego, a character whose name was inspired by the Brazilian singer and actress Carmen Miranda, along with the city of San Diego, California. The character herself would be modeled after Marcia Bell, who at the time was Broderbund's manager of marketing services. Although the developers had at first intended for her to be one of the many thieves that players would pursue, the decision would later be made to make her into the main villain after project manager Catherine Bird took a liking to the name. Slowly but surely, the game's direction was taking shape. However, instead of being a simple game of cops and robbers, it would instead become a globe-hopping affair, but at the same time, it had a simplistic interface that could appeal to the young audience that Bigham and Broderbund were aiming for. The final product would cast players as a rookie with the Acme Detective Agency. Your goal was to catch Carmen Sandiego, along with her henchmen, who are all members of the Villains International League of Evil, or VILE for short. Each case will have a random villain steal something, and it will be up to you to piece together who the culprit was, along with where they went. In each location, you have to question the locals to gather clues as to the perp's identity and where they might have gone next. You are also under a time limit, so it's important to get the right clues as quickly as possible. You have to file a warrant by identifying the correct villain based on the clues that you were given about the perp's gender, hobbies, and other distinguishing features. Sometimes you would encounter a VILE agent with a simple animation, and this will let you know that you are on the right track. Once you close in on the perp, there's a brief fight sequence with a shootout, and then the perp is apprehended, provided that you had the right warrant, Otherwise, it would get away and you'd fail the case. The included almanac came into play as younger players could use it to look up the needed information, and it also served as a form of copy protection. Once you solved a certain number of cases, you would be eligible to move up to the next rank. However, you need to answer a question that you would have to use the almanac for before you can move up to the next rank. If you caught enough of her henchmen, Sandiego herself would begin stealing. Once you caught her, you would earn a spot in the game's Hall of Fame and retire from detective work. Keeping up with Broderbund's use of humor, the criminals you pursued throughout the franchise often had pun-like names like Just In Case, Serenade, and Jane Reaction. However, some of the criminals in the first game were inspired by Broderbund employees, such as Catherine Dribb, who was created by reversing the last name of Kathy Bird, and Fast Eddie B, inspired by Broderbund's director of product development, Ed Bernstein. Where in the World is Carmen Sandiego would be released in 1985. Within the decade, it would sell over 4 million copies. This was primarily thanks to the game being requested by educators for their classrooms. While 4 million copies in 10 years might not seem that impressive, especially compared to today's AAA gaming space, you gotta keep in mind that this was when shareware and digital distribution were still in their infancy, and well over a decade before Steam or any other kind of online marketplace. You also gotta remember that home computers weren't as prevalent at the time as they are now, and this was a new IP and an educational title at that. The Carmen Sandiego games would become Broderbund's second biggest selling software after the print shop program. The game's success would help the company go public on NASDAQ in 1991. It's not hard to imagine creators Bigham and Sefkin being surprised by the game's success. Bigham in particular wanted to work on action games originally and was unsure if Carmen Sandiego would succeed. According to a 2017 article on Kotaku, Bigham was disappointed when he couldn't work on other games because he was too busy with Carmen Sandiego, which at the time hadn't been finished yet. However, hearing about the game's popularity among educators took him by surprise. For Sefkin, he was similarly shocked upon receiving huge royalty statements for his role as a writer on the game. What was more shocking is that his share was only 2%. Broderbund made sure that everyone who worked on the game was compensated accordingly. This was back when game development studios treated their employees like rock stars. It's kind of depressing when you think about it nowadays, especially when you consider the amount of video game industry layoffs. But that's neither here nor there. Where in the World is Carmen Sandiego would come to several other gaming platforms, including Commodore 64, Amiga, Sega Master System, Sega Genesis, and the Super Nintendo. The game will receive several remakes, among them a 1990 remake that utilized upgraded VGA graphics, a 1992 CD-ROM upgrade, and a 1996 reboot version. The CD-ROM release, aka the Deluxe Edition, features digitized photos from National Geographic Society, spoken dialogue, a revised interface, and music from Smithsonian Folkways. The 1996 game would feature a video of actress Lynn Thigpen, who portrayed the role of the Chief in the PBS game show. We'll talk about that in a minute. Over the next few years, the game will receive several sequels, including 1986's Where in the USA is Carmen Sandiego, 1988's Where in Europe is Carmen Sandiego, 1989's Where in Time is Carmen Sandiego, 1991's Where in America's Past is Carmen Sandiego, and 1993's Where in Space is Carmen Sandiego. Where in the USA and Where in Time will receive updates and console ports of their own, with Where in Time receiving an NES port thanks to Konami. Maybe one day we'll take a look at the rest of these games. Another title of note is Carmen Sandiego in Japan, which was a Japan exclusive entry that was originally released for the PC-98 home computer. In 1989, Broderbund would also publish Where in North Dakota is Carmen Sandiego, a game developed to coincide with the state's centennial celebration. Rather than develop it themselves, Broderbund developed the game alongside a team of educators within the Minot public school system. The game's purpose was to both teach North Dakota school kids about their state and to field test a possible series of Carmen Sandiego games that would take place in each of the United States. Obviously this wouldn't pan out, as only a small amount of copies were printed and sold to schools in the region. Worse yet, the game would become Broderbund's lowest selling game. Pretty much the only way you could get it is if you lived in North Dakota or had a connect within the school system. Retail copies were very rare, as the game wasn't even listed in Broderbund's product catalog, although it could be ordered by mail. Thankfully, video game historian Frank Cafaldi of the Video Game History Foundation helped digitally archive the game. You can even play it online via the DOS archive. The game itself isn't bad in its own right. There were a few small differences from other Carmen Sandiego games. Instead of being an Acme detective, you are part of the Nodak Detective Agency, and instead of an airplane, you will make use of a four-wheel drive vehicle to explore the state. This is another one I might look at in the future. Let me know if you want to see more of a deep dive, and I'll put it on the stockpile of other promised videos, such as the King of Fighters Maximum Impact documentary, and the Polygame Master Deep Dive. Part of me wonders how things would have turned out had this game succeeded. Imagine, we're in Ohio as Carmen Sandiego. Maybe Val goes to Kent State and tries to steal the May 4th Memorial. Maybe I can explore the Goodwill plant to ask for clues. Or maybe I'll head down to East 99 in Cleveland and bump into Crazy Bone. Carmen would make her way into other media, primarily television. In 1991, Where in the World is Carmen Sandiego, a half-hour children's game show, would premiere on PBS. Groups of kids ages 10 to 14 would compete against each other, answering geography-related questions in an attempt to capture one of Carmen's henchmen, or even Carmen herself. The show was hosted by Greg Lee, with actress Lynn Thigpen, who many of you might remember as the voice of the DJ in The Warriors, playing the role of the chief. And of course there is that iconic theme song, performed by New York-based a cappella group, Rockapella. The show was created to help kids with geography, with the game's answers verified by National Geographic magazine. The show would run for 5 seasons, from 1992 to 1995. The show will be followed up by Where in Time is Carmen Sandiego, which would have a focus on history. Len Thigpen will return as the chief, Kevin Shinnick will replace Greg Lee as the host, and a group called The Engine Room will replace Rockapella as the show's singers, informants, and narrators. The show will run for 2 seasons from 1996 to 1997. Where in the World is Carmen Sandiego had won 6 Daytime Emmy Awards along with a Peabody Award. Where in Time, on the other hand, would be nominated 14 times for a Daytime Emmy Award, but they would win one in 1998 for Outstanding Lighting Direction. Kevin Shinnick would go on to have an illustrious career as a voice actor, writer, director, and producer, working on shows such as Cartoon Network's Mad, Disney XD's Spider-Man, and the Adult Swim animated series Robot Chicken. Greg Lee, the previous host, would go on to do voice work in the animated series Doug, and will play the role of Rick in the pilot episode of News Radio before being replaced by Joe Rogan. Yes, that Joe Rogan. Len Thigpen would later go on to be featured in numerous other roles in TV shows such as Cosby, King of the Hill, and the crime drama The District, before tragically passing away of a brain hemorrhage in 2003. Rockapella is still doing new music as of 2024, and you can check them out on their YouTube channel. Although the group's lineup has gone through several changes since Where in the World is Carmen Sandiego. Sean Altman, the former member of Rockapella who put together the Engine Crew, is also still doing music and has a YouTube channel of his own. Speaking of the Engine Crew, I couldn't find much info on what they had been doing since Where in Time is Carmen Sandiego, and I'm not sure they were formed just for the show, but hopefully their members were able to move on to bigger things too. Carmen would make her way to animated form too. DIC Productions would produce Where on Earth is Carmen Sandiego, a half-hour TV show that premiered in 1994 as part of the Fox Kids animation block. It would run for 4 seasons, from 1994 until January of 1999. The show depicted Zack and Ivy, 2 detectives from Acme who were tracking down Carmen as she stole treasures from around the world. The 2 were aided by the player, a mysterious character who's shown only in live action. The player teleports them to wherever they need to go, and it's implied that the show is a game that the player is playing. Carmen herself is voiced by Rita Moreno. She's a former Acme agent who went rogue, although she has a strict code of ethics and has even teamed up with Zack and Ivy against other enemies. The show made use of foreign languages and trivia, keeping in spirit with the educational themes of the gaming franchise. Even though the show was educational and geared toward children, it was still compelling and mature, and it didn't insult the intelligence of its young target audience. After all, this was on the same programming block as X-Men and Batman. In 2019, Carmen Sandiego would debut on Netflix. In this version, Carmen is a former agent of Vile who turned rogue against them. She's being pursued by both Acme and Vile. The series contains several callbacks to earlier Carmen Sandiego media. For instance, she's aided by a hacker known as the Player, along with two siblings named Zack and Ivy, all three of whom were inspired by characters with the same names from the Fox Kids show. The Chief seems to be inspired by Lynn Thigpen's character from the game shows, and even Chase Deveneaux, a character named after the main character of Carmen Sandiego Word Detective, is a prominent character in the series. The show will run for 4 seasons until 2021, with the show even featuring an interactive movie that featured different endings based on the player's choices. Speaking of Netflix, they're also working on an upcoming live-action movie produced by Kevin Mishner for Mishner Films and starring Gina Rodriguez. The film was announced back in 2018, but we have yet to hear any of it since then, other than it's currently in development. Carmen Sandiego will be found in other forms of media too, including places where you wouldn't expect. In 1998, a planetarium show known as Where in the Universe is Carmen Sandiego will be shown throughout planetariums in the United States, Canada, and Japan. Taking the format of a quiz show in outer space, the series was aimed at encouraging audience participation while also promoting listening and math skills. A sequel, Where in the Universe is Carmen Sandiego 2, expanded the focus to include facts about space, the cosmos, and astronomy. Both shows featured actresses Lynn Thigpen and Rita Moreno reprising their roles as the Chief and Carmen respectively. The shows will continue until 2013. There would also be a couple of albums inspired by and featuring music from the game shows. Where in the World is Carmen Sandiego was released in 1992. This album predominantly featured rockapella, but also featured outside musicians such as Urban Blight and Latin jazz singer Tito Puente. The second, Carmen Sandiego Out of This World, was released in 1994. This album primarily featured the host Greg Lee singing, along with rockapella, They Might Be Giants, and XTC. In 2000, there would even be a concert series. Where in the World of Music is Carmen Sandiego would be developed by Gary Sheldon. The series would be made of 3 concerts: The Case of the Missing Concert Hall, The Case of the Missing Bells, and The Case of the Missing Pyramid. The series was designed to teach children about music and geography, as audience members will use musical clues to catch Carmen. Schools would even host Carmen Sandiego Days, which are events inspired by the franchise. So there's like a ton of more stuff out there, including books and board games. But if I go through everything, then we're going to be here all day. So if you don't mind, I want to get back to the games. Toward the end of the 90s, the series would make several changes in both graphics and gameplay. Along with 1996's remake of Where in the World is Carmen Sandiego, there will also be remakes of Where in the USA, along with Where in Time is Carmen Sandiego. Like the remake of Where in the World, these will feature cartoony graphics along with QuickTime video of actress Lynn Thigpen as the Chief. In 1998, Broderbund will also release Where in the World is Carmen Sandiego, The Great Amtrak Train Adventure, which was a special edition of the 1996 game that was developed as a promotional collaboration with train company Amtrak. These would be the last few games with the series' traditional style of gameplay. Later games, such as Math Detective and Word Detective, would take the series in different directions. In 1998, the rights to the franchise would be acquired by the Learning Company. The Learning Company itself would see its ownership change hands throughout the next several years. The games released from then on would be even further departures from the series' formula, beginning with Carmen Sandiego's Think Quick Challenge, a 1999 quiz game which put players against Carmen's gang of criminals. 2001 would see a brand new version of Where in the World is Carmen Sandiego. This would be subtitled Treasures of Knowledge. However, this game will be nothing like any previous version of Where in the World. Instead, this will be a point-and-click adventure game with puzzle elements. 2002 would see the franchise cross over with another Learning Company property, The Clue Finders, and Mystery Mansion Arcade. This game would see Carmen team up with the game's antagonist as their mysterious new leader. In 2004, BAM Entertainment would publish Carmen Sandiego, The Secret of the Stolen Drums, which was an action platformer for the Xbox, PlayStation 2, and Nintendo GameCube. The Secret of the Stolen Drums had all but stripped out the educational elements that had made the series famous. Needless to say, it's largely looked down upon by many fans, and is considered a low point in the franchise. However, there's an interesting side note. You see, the developer of the game was a Montreal-based company called Artificial Mind and Movement. You might not be familiar with that name, but in 2016, they would go on to create the online game Dead by Daylight. Of course, by then, the company had long since changed its name to Behavior Interactive. But at the time of Secret of the Stolen Drums' release, they had been putting the name on anything they could think of. There was an even lower point than that. Where in the World is Carmen Sandiego? Mystery at the End of the World, or sometimes called Where in the World is Carmen Sandiego 3, was another point-and-click adventure game that was only released in parts of Europe and only on PC and Nintendo DS. The game would be released in 2009, and at that point the Carmen Sandiego franchise was pretty much on life support. Fortunately, the 2010s would see a series of jumpstarts for the franchise as new games would pop up in various formats here and there. Unfortunately, while many of these games were a lot better than the stuff that we got in the early 2000s, many of these would be shut down early or trapped on discontinued platforms. In 2011 and 2012, the Learning Company, now owned by Hoekton Mifflin Harcourt, released a series of downloadable WiiWare games that were titled Adventures in Math. Of course, with the WiiWare shop having closed its servers a few years ago, the games have gone with it. Although I'm sure that you can find and play them, provided you're willing to tap into your inner Black Caesar. There will also be a Facebook version of Where in the World is Carmen Sandiego, which was developed by Blue Fang Games. This was released in 2011. Sadly, it will be removed in January of the following year after the developer was shut down, making this lost media. In 2015, the Learning Company will release an iOS and PC game called Carmen Sandiego Returns. The Windows version will require the RealSense camera, and the iOS version made use of touchscreen controls. The app was praised for harking back to the franchise's older days, although it was criticized for having in-app purchases. Around the time of the Netflix series, Hoekton would partner with Google to release a series of games that made use of Google Earth. These games were developed to tie into the Netflix series. Unfortunately, they seem to be defunct as I can no longer pull them up online. The footage you're watching is actually the footage that I made from the last version of this video. I'm just glad I saved it before they took the game down. In 2020, there will also be a Roblox game that was officially released by Hoekton and developed by Curious Media. This was titled Carmen Sandiego Lost Treasure. This was a multiplayer game where players could either join Team Carmen, Team Vile, or play as an Acme agent. If you are on Team Carmen or Team Vile, your goal was to find the lost treasure. If you are on Team Acme, your goal was to simply arrest everyone. As of right now, this one doesn't seem to be shut down, but I don't see much in the way of updates recently. I'm not really into Roblox, but I have a couple nephews who love it, so maybe I'll see if they want to check it out. If any of you guys watching this has played the game, then feel free to hop into the comments and let me know how it is. So while things obviously weren't the same as they were during the mid-80s to mid-90s heyday of the series, it was clear that the Carmen Sandiego franchise still had some life within it, particularly with the Netflix series introducing Carmen to a new generation of fans. Even after the show's conclusion, the franchise remains as active as ever, with new projects popping up as recently as 2025. Like the best gaming franchises and the best criminals, you can't keep Carmen down for long. In 2021, HarperCollins, a subsidiary of News Corp, would purchase HMH Books and Media for $349 million. This included the Carmen Sandiego computer game franchise. In 2024, a branding company known as WildBrain, who worked on the Netflix series, announced that it was working with HarperCollins in order to produce new merchandise based on Carmen Sandiego. If you're into the older games, most of them can be played for free on the archive.org DOS section. Also, a company called Basic Fun put out a handheld a few years ago that contains the VGA version of Where in the World is Carmen Sandiego. I looked at this in the previous version of my video. It's a bit harder to find in stores nowadays and is a bit pricey online, but if you can find one in the wild, it's a great way to experience the original game. There's a new title out too. HarperCollins and Gameloft put out a brand new single player puzzle adventure game in 2025. The game will first come to the Netflix app and will later come to PC along with Xbox, PlayStation, and Nintendo Switch. The major difference is that this new game allowed players to take control of the Master Thief for the very first time. Like in the older games, you have to explore locations and find clues to deduce the identity of the perpetrator. This time, however, the game features a number of mini-games to keep players engaged. It's a great game for what it is and it's pretty fun, but keep in mind that this was adapted from a mobile app and the game is meant primarily for younger players. I took a look at the game on my channel a few months ago if you want to learn more. And of course there's that movie, but seeing as how it's been radio silent since it was first announced, I'll believe it when I see it. So while we're waiting on the latest news involving Carmen Sandiego, one must remember the old saying, real G's move in silence. Therefore, we can rest assured that Carmen Sandiego is hard at work planning her next heist. No doubt fans both old and new are eagerly awaiting her next caper. And personally, I think it's high time we bring back games that teach players something and don't suck. Lord knows with all the controversy surrounding the American education system, we could use some positivity. Who knows, maybe we can pull the kids off Fortnite for a bit and have them solving some cases and learning geography. Or maybe we can just bring back Rex Ronan. While on the subject of edutainment, I want to give a shout out to this video sponsor, Screeps. Screeps is a series of strategy games where you use JavaScript to spawn and control the behavior of your units. You can either play Screeps World, where you participate in a persistent online world with other players, or you can play Screeps Arena, where you take on other players in a series of 1v1 matches, complete with rankings and seasons. If you're into computer programming and software development, you're going to want to check it out. Granted, it doesn't look as pretty as StarCraft and Command & Conquer, and there is a learning curve, but once things click, you'll get caught up just like your other strategy favorites, and you can put your JavaScript skills to the test. Check out using the link in my description, where you can get both games at a discount. Remember, the Don doesn't promote anything on his platform that he doesn't believe in, or he wouldn't use himself, so if you see it here, you know it's legit. So if you made it to this point in the video, I want you to do me a quick favor. I want you to go to the comments and drop your favorite Carmen Sandiego villain name. Mine is Fast Eddie B. So at the top of the video, I mentioned that I was revisiting some of my older works and redoing them because I didn't like the way they turned out the first time. One of the videos I revisited was a documentary I did about the game company Data East. They're the legendary company behind games like Bad Dudes, Heavy Barrel, and so many other classic titles. Matter of fact, I did the original version of that video around the same time I put out the original version of the Carmen Sandiego video. So I redid that a few years ago, and it's one of those slow burn videos that like are still getting views and they're still getting comments as recently as this past July. So if you want to check that out, if you're in the mood for learning more about retro games, that video just popped up on your screen. So check that out, and until next time, I'm Audi 51000G, kinfolk.